Ladies, gentlemen, and goo-drooling zombies, is it me or is it sultry in here? Our two creature contenders pose this burning question and more as Twilight Zone cranks up the jungle temps to explore the duality of man, while Goosebumps reminds us that a regular-sized head blessedly loses more heat than a shrunken one in this sweltering episode of Put Up Your Spooks!
I'm Jeff, representing the 80s.
And I am Ryan, in those sweltering 90s.
How are you doing with the heat?
It feels like even hotter today. I kept looking at my phone all week because it was saying, like, it's going to cool down, but then it didn't.
Where I am, we have a lot of greenery that acts as like a heat sink. What's been unusual about this heat dome effect is that we were experiencing humidity kind of like they get on the East Coast, but it rained and like we were hoping like, okay, the heat's going to break. That's what's supposed to happen, and I think it just drove the humidity back up.
Speaking of hot, humid plants, what's this week's theme?
Rumble in the jungle.
You want me to send my son away from home to a jungle on the other side of the world for 2 whole weeks? When?
My episode this week is Halfway Horrible from Tales from the Crypt, and it stars no less than Clancy Brown, Martin Kove, aka Kreese from Karate Kid, with a surprise and somewhat pointless cameo from Cheech Marin.
And don't forget about Toad from American Graffiti. You can't forget about Toad.
So it starts with the Crypt Keeper. He's a salon owner, and he is shrinking heads, which is a beautiful tie-in to Ryan's episode. In the story itself, we start with Clancy Brown, who's playing one Mr. Roger Lassen, and he's at the morgue with a cop, and he's identifying a body, a real goopy, gross body. That body is Dan King, one of the co-founders of the Lassen Chemical Company. And his corpse is leaking a glowing blue fluid, which Roger identifies as Expion B.
Yeah, and then they're like taste testing the blue goo with their...
Well,
they run a finger through it at least.
It is supposed to be like an all-natural preservative, so, you know.
And then they go, his head won't rot for 100 years, but it's pretty rotten.
So the cop says, like, yeah, we found a hypodermic of blue goo in this guy's neck. What's in this shit? And Roger's like, okay, that's Dan King. He co-founded my chemical company. The blue goo is Expion B, which is hard to say without sounding like you have a lisp. Expion B is made from an herb in the rainforest. The cop is like, okay, well, how about this? And he whips out a note that was in the dead man's pocket that says, I have not forgotten or forgiven. And he's like, yeah, it wasn't Dan King's handwriting, so we don't think this is a suicide note. Roger's like, okay. And then he sees a tribal symbol painted on the body's chest. And this just makes his headache worse. And the cop is like, how about this? It's a picture of you and Dan. And he's like, oh yeah, that was me. We were doing a boys trip down to Brazil. And he just names off all the other preppy guys in the group. And he says, and that's Alex. He died down there. And the cop says, do you have any enemies? He says, not for a long time. Cut to Brazil, 6 years earlier. The guys are all prepped up at a tribal voodoo ritual. They're in like khakis and polos and chinos. And it's just really funny because people in the jungle wear just regular clothing. But usually when you see people in a movie or a show where they're touring the jungle, they're all in like their jungle fatigues and like safari wear. And just to see them in their golf shirts, I don't know, it's kind of funny. They're tourists. They're on a research mission, specifically there to see a tribal voodoo ritual. But they're not just watching, they are participating. Roger administers a bowl of glowing blue slime to a stunned native that they have propped up in a coffin. And his friend Dan, the corpse we saw earlier, is like, this is crazy. And their friend Kevin is like, we're going straight to hell. But Alex is into it. He's like, we came down here to Brazil to go all the way, baby. So Roger paints the tribal mark on the man's chest, and the tribe seals him inside the box. And they're like, Roger, this side of you is evil.
Everybody has an evil side. Secret's just learning how to keep it on a leash.
Back in the present, Roger goes home, still has his headache, but now his whole place has been trashed. someone's painted the walls with the words, "I have not forgotten or forgiven," and left a creepy little, like, hand-painted figure of a businessman. One side of it looks like a devil. Cops come over, it's Crease again, and they ask him about his enemies, and Roger's like, nobody's after me, and I can't leave town because I'm trying to oversee this FDA approval of Extheon B. So Roger goes, doodle-doo, thinks back to Brazil. The guys have figured out how to harvest the glowing blue slime from the herb. Just then, Roger busts in and says, "Cheese it, it's the cops, we gotta bail." And like, we can't leave Brazil, where's Alex? And he's like, yeah, don't worry, Alex said he's gonna take his own plane. In reality, Alex is lying in a box, all doped up and ready for the blue slime. Alex pleads with Roger. He's like, "Please, I'm your best friend." And Roger said, "Remember, we came here to go all the way, baby. And this tribe demands a sacrifice." So the next day, Roger is in the present. He's at work. He's given an interview about Extheon B. And he makes a incredible claim. So he pulls out some nasty 2-year-old apples and makes the interview eat it. And he's like, "Oh, this apple's crisp and delicious." Just like the corpse we saw of Dan King. Roger's like, "Yeah, this revolutionary preservative will preserve food literally forever and end famine."
I kind of wanted to see a side effect on the interviewer, too. Like, he had no idea what he was eating, really.
I know.
And he was like, "Okay, you got me."
Yeah, the FDA has not yet approved this preservative. And spoiler, does not approve of Extheon B. But Extheon B, this preservative, is supposed to work on the wood you use in your house, supposed to work on clothing, and it's like the bee's knees.
The Extheon B's knees.
The zombie's knees. This advisor shows up, and he's like, "Hey, Roger, the FDA is spooked about these murders going around, people getting killed with hypodermics of Extheon B. We think it's your friend Kevin. He's all goofed up, and he's spilling secrets about Extheon B. This is going to be bad. You got to shut him up." And he just phrases this all in, like, the worst way possible. He's like, "You got all this bad karma that's going to land on your head. What goes around comes around, baby. But not you and me.
Till death do us part."
Really, if you had a mustache, you'd be twisting it,
Mm-hmm.
which is just a strategic error on his part. So Roger goes off to see Kevin, and he's sweating. He's starting to lose it. He's experiencing missing time. By the time he, like, stumbles into Kevin's place, wouldn't you know it, Kevin is dead. He's got a syringe of Extheon B in his neck, and there's another note: "I have not forgotten or forgiven." Roger FFOs, runs back to the office and confronts the advisor, and he's like, "You set me up. He was dead when he got there, and you're trying to ruin me." And the guy's like, "No, I was just being dramatic. All that stuff I said about karma coming back to haunt you, and until death do us part. I'm sorry." Apology not accepted. Roger smashes his head into the table until he dies. Sarcastic applause drifts in from the shadowy hallway. And who does he see there? None other but Alex, the best friend that he blue slimed and left in Brazil. And now he's a zombie. Roger says, "It's impossible. You're dead." And Alex says, "Nobody dies in Macumbu voodoo, Roger. You know that. They're just raised and raised over and over forever." So Roger naturally thinks, he's losing his mind. This isn't real. And Alex is like, "Yes, it's real, and you're going crazy." Which is like a weird kind of double beat.
And he literally is double evil with his, like, weird double evil doll.
You're right. It's not like, oh, he's a good guy and half of him is devil. It's like, no, half of him owns a chemical company, which is evil, and the other half is devil. Alec the zombie is like doing a little CSI, and he's like, "Look, here's a sample of your handwriting, and here's a sample of the killer's handwriting. Do you see how they match? That's right, Roger. You are the killer. You've been having homicidal blackouts and killing people. It's your unrestrained evil side." And I guess Alex is trying to say that he's been under a voodoo curse for so long that he now knows how to use a different voodoo curse on Roger and make his restrained evil side come out.
Oh, Alex was making it happen?
That's what he's implying. But it just so happens that Roger keeps a tribal halberd on display and he goes full Kurgan and decapitates Alex.
There can be only one.
At this point, Roger finally calls a doctor.
Which doctors? Exactly. Which doctors from the island of Lumbago?
So he goes home, and the doctor shows up, and it's Cheech Marin for some reason. For a doctor that does house calls, it's fortunate that he's also a voodoo specialist, because he knows exactly what's going on. He knows exactly what rituals are required to fix it. So what they have to do is they have to destroy Roger's evil side. Roger agrees to undergo this process to kill his evil side, no matter how dangerous it could be. So Cheech Marin lays him down on a bed of roses and surrounds his naked body with candles. Then he's like, Roger, are you ready for me? And he's like, yes, doctor, do it. There's a blast of drums and thunder. The lights turn red. The doors blow open. And the doctor appears in full witch doctor regalia. I don't know if he's the voodoo deity from Brazil or if that's just how witch doctors operate. I don't know if it's all in Roger's head. It's nuts. But the next time we see Roger, he's strategically seated in the shadows. He's calling his office. And he's like, hey, secretary, I need you to bring over some Extheon B. And the secretary's like, the police are here and they have some question about some bodies we found in your office. He's like, I don't care. Just bring me that syringe of blue goo. She turns on the light and screams. Roger has stripped the flesh from half of his body. Roger claims that the procedure was a success. He's killed his evil half. And he's won. He's beaten the curse. He's beaten Alex. And all he needs to do now is preserve himself. And so he takes that hypo of Extheon B and he jams it in his neck. The end.
We came down here to go all the way.
We have a real thing with blue goo on this show.
It just, the camera loves it. But somehow it's just like a crazy dense episode.
Perhaps we'll find some answers in my episode. Goosebumps, How I Got My Shrunken Head.
Honestly, Benna, a shrunken head?
There's a boy named Mark. Mark gets a knock on his door in the middle of the night, and he goes out to answer. There's nobody there. There's a package, and it's like, to Mark, under the stairs, Privet Drive. And I was expecting, what? It's all a dream? But it wasn't a dream. He really gets a package, which he like takes into his awesome tiki-themed room and throws on the ground.
Can we talk about that tiki-themed room for a second?
Yeah. How does it compare to the hockey room?
Yeah, no. We see a lot of pretty wild themed rooms in the stuff we watch. The most common is Monster Kid room, where every available surface is just like kitted out in awesome monster stuff. This is something we do see from time to time in these 80s, 90s kid shows, and I'm going to call it Safari Kid, where they're just like totally into jungle and adventure.
Yeah.
But this was next level. He had thatching all around his ceiling and his bed, and that is like such a crazy fire hazard. I just had to give it props.
I've always wanted to do a room in a cool way like that somehow.
Yeah.
But boy, it would be hard to clean.
Just lean into it at that point.
Yeah, well,
You know?
yeah, it's true. I have a hard enough time cleaning my normal room, so.
Throw down some moss and some mushrooms and some creeper vines.
Yeah, so I liked it. I was a fan of his room. He gets distracted or something. He throws the box on the floor, and a shrunken head explodes out of the box, floats into the air, chases the kid around. He's locked in his room. He can't get out. He's screaming, Mom, help me, help me. And I was thinking, boah, it's all a dream. But it wasn't a dream. The mom opens the door with her new boyfriend, and Mark is like, the shrunken head's chasing me and is trying to kill me. And she's like, new boyfriend? Meet my son. Cut to screeching tires as the boyfriend drives away. And she's like, thanks. I was this close to getting my rocks off after like 2 weeks of dry spell.
No, she said it had been like a year and a half.
Right, it had been a long time since
she'd been on a date. And I felt bad for her. Because that guy was a real catch.
He was like a beer-bellied, grease-covered mechanic, and she was like, oh, this was the one.
What are you talking about? That guy was a total Chad. I sincerely empathized with the mom. Like, I could tell, she is pissed.
We've all been there.
And she's had it. I think that worked really well into the setup. Because as we see
for days.
What follows...
Yeah.
They laid the groundwork very nice.
She's like, Mark, you just had a dream. Boah, she says. But he's not really paying attention. He's playing a video game, shouting, Kali Ma! Shakti Day! And she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he's like, it's a word I made up. It makes me feel powerful.
Her restraint, she's like, let's talk about what's going on. You're really starting to get on my nerves. And before she can even get that sentence out, he fires up a knockoff game of Pitfall and starts screaming at the top of his lungs in made-up voodoo language.
Are you listening to me?
How she didn't just slap that computer off his desk.
She does show a remarkable amount of restraint, but she then does tell him that she's pretty sick of this bullshit, and she's been lenient all up until now, but it's about time he gets rid of all his shit. She tells him to break down his tiki room, get rid of all his alligators, his leopard skin rugs, his thatched bed roof, all of it.
The tiki bar is closed.
So I don't think he actually does it, but he does go to sleep that night and dream of his creepy jungle aunt. She turns around, she has like a birthday cake or something. Maybe the birthday cake says, be careful.
It does, and I think he has a crush on his aunt.
Oh, big time. So the next morning, his mom gets a phone call from the Aunt Benna, that says she wants Mark to come visit. And the mom is like,
You want me to send my son away from home to a jungle on the other side of the world for 2 whole weeks?
and then she flashes back to her blue balls, and she's like, where do I sign? Cut to kid on flight. He gets to the airport at the jungle, lands, runs into this dude who says, Kali Ma? Shakti Day? And then he's like, huh? And then an Asian Elvis impersonator pilot says, hey, are you Mark? Oh, I'm your pilot. Let's go into the jungle. They head to the plane, and 2 sinister dudes in white are watching them. So they're in the plane. Suddenly, Elvis has a problem. Plane is going down, but then Mark hears a voice coming from his pocket. It's the shrunken head talking to him, so he shouts, Kali Ma! It saves the day. The plane rights itself, and they land safely in the jungle. And the guy's like, here, give this licorice gum to Dr. Hollings. He loves his licorice gum. Dr. Hollings' daughter, Kareen, comes over and is like, hey, you got my new CDs? I'm cool, hip teenager. It becomes obvious, I don't know, I guess the pilot tells him, oh, Dr. Hollings works with your Aunt Benna. They go to the camp where the doctors are doing their stuff, and Aunt Benna is doing her stuff. And all over the camp, sinister dudes and ladies in white are watching. And also working for the Hollingses. Kareen immediately establishes herself as over it. Dr. Hollings, the lady version, shows Mark around. And then her husband, Dr. Hollings, the man version, who tells Mark that, unfortunately, his Aunt Benna has disappeared into the jungle. So that night, Mark has another dream about Aunt Benna, like, spinning a coin at him, which transitions to him caught in a giant spider web and some kind of giant Indonesian man spider snarling at him.
And who is the face of that giant man spider?
I couldn't tell, really.
It's Dr. Hollingsworth.
Oh, it was. Oh, so it's
Yeah.
not an Indonesian, it's just the doctor then.
And it's disturbing.
Oh, it's prescient. He's caught in Dr. Hollings' web, but he doesn't even know it yet. He wakes up, the shrunken head is like, hello, follow me, and like floats away, takes him to the main tent, where he finds a TV and videotapes of Aunt Benna. Aunt Benna's like, these are my colleagues, the Hollingses. They're from Miskatonic University.
A Lovecraft connection.
Yeah. And they're kind of like fighting. You can tell there's a little bit of tension on the tape. There's tension between the doctors, Hollings and Aunt Benna. Dr. Hollings comes into the tent and Mark hides, and Doc gets on the radio and he's like, they can't find Benna. And then the voice on the radio is like, well, at least you got the kid as a hostage. And Dr. Hollings is like, I prefer to call him a guest. Mark runs out of the tent. He runs into one of the sinister dudes in white, and he's like, help me, you gotta help me. And the guy just goes...
He has like a full-on howler monkey roar.
Yeah.
And it's scary.
He growls at him.
I'm not going to lie. It goes pretty hard.
I think he grabs him up, and then Dr. Hollings comes out and is like, you're not going anywhere. And then Doc tells him all about how Aunt Benna found the Kali Ma, a.k.a. the jungle magic, and that she's using it for nefarious purposes to turn all the people in white into mindless zombies. When they tried to stop her, she ran off into the jungle, and they tricked Mark into coming to the jungle to help find her with a computer recreation of his aunt's voice.
Hello, Mark. Why don't you come visit me
And he's like, see what we can do with computers these days? Isn't it amazing?
It's like they took one of the video logs
And
that
stitched
the
it all
aunt was
together.
making and stitched the audio together. But it was kind of funny that like they did a deep fake
Yeah.
of Aunt Benna.
And then they did, when the mom was talking to her on the phone, she did say, like, oh, I can barely hear you. So that was the lantern they hung on it. Mark is like, I'll do whatever you want, Doc. And then, like, the very next shot is him walking through the jungle being like, I know a goddamn phony when I see one. So he doesn't trust the doc, and he just goes off into the jungle on his own. He gets bitten by a bug. He sees a snake. He jumps away and immediately lands in quicksand up to his knees. Corrine, the daughter, comes and finds him, but she can't get him out. And there's a lot of, like, really nice little banter here.
Can't you get me closer? If I could come any closer, I'd be up there with you, Corinne.
She can't get him out with sticks, branches.
And to his discredit, this Safari kid does not know how to get out of quicksand.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to lay flat, dummy. Eventually, all he can do is use the power of the Kali Ma to get out. So he summons a vine, pulls himself out. Corrine is like, whoa, what the hell? What was that? He tells her all about the jungle magic. Corrine tells Mark that it was actually her dad that used jungle Kali magic, and he's the bad guy. So the head starts floating again, and they follow it. And then Mark tells Corrine about the time his aunt hypnotized him alone in his room on his 8th birthday, and it's super creepy. So they fall into a big tiger pit, and this crazy jungle man jumps out and is like, and then he's like, oh no! And she's like, Mark? It's actually Aunt Benna in disguise as a crazy jungle man. She gets them out of the pit and tells them that the Hollings must never get the jungle magic because they're bad, bad people. And Corrine, when they're pulling out, he's like, don't worry, Corrine's on our side. And she's like, ha, not so fast. She grabs the head, and then the Hollings pop out of the jungle, and they're like, good work, Corrine. You're not over it after all. You're more like a 50s teen. She tries to do the jungle magic with the shrunken head, but it doesn't work for her. And then they're like, we should have disowned you at birth. So they kidnap everyone. They bring them back to the camp. They're like, show us how the jungle magic works. Otherwise, we're going to head shrink Mark. So they suspend him from a crane over this boiling vat of goo. This is green goo, though, not blue goo. Ben is like, Mark, remember your birthday hypnotizing. Remember it.
The magic is in me.
And he uses the jungle magic to float himself around and then make all the zombies turn on the Hollingses. They chase them onto the platform and they all fall into the goo. And then he saves the day. And then, of course, Mark has to give up the goddamn jungle magic because his aunt is like, it's too dangerous for just one preteen. And then she hypnotizes him again.
At least they didn't go the route that a lot of these shows go, where the character gets ultimate power and they're like, I didn't want it anyway. Like,
Yeah. He actually
Mark
is like, I can't wait to
Mark
see what
is
else I can do.
pushing back hard.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm a Jedi now, like my father before me. You are not taking this away from me.
Yeah. Back home, Mark is telling Mom's new boyfriend.
In his sports room.
Sports-themed room?
Yeah, that's sort of a character growth thing.
Yeah, I guess.
That he's reconciled with his mom because he took down Tiki Room.
But he still has his shrunken head because he's telling the new boyfriend, that's how I got my shrunken head. And then the mom comes in and is like, let's get out of here to watch television, quote unquote.
To Goosebumps and chill.
The mom and the boyfriend leave the room, and then Mark goes to his closet, opens the door, and looks in his little aquarium, and there is the Hollings family, 1, 2, 3, all shrunken to tiny little people, and he's just got them in there, torturing them, throwing them scraps of bread, which don't have enough nutrition. They're gonna get scurvy in there big time. And that's it. He's like, Aunt Benna will fix you.
On his 16th birthday.
Ah, God, what's he gonna get up to with those mini Hollingses?
I shudder to think. Let's jump into ratings. Halfway Horrible, body count for How I Got My Shrunken Head.
0.
Scare Factor, Halfway Horrible. I'm gonna put that more in classic Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah.
Shock Factor. Scare Factor for How I Got My Shrunken Head. Tarantula Face Dream.
Tarantula face, yeah, pretty scary.
Strong. I got a nice spook out of that roaring zombie. What I have learned about Goosebumps, having never watched it growing up, I appreciate how Goosebumps goes there. They have no compunctions about putting children in obvious peril. Whereas even in Are You Afraid of the Dark, kids they get scared, but there's not a lot of direct peril.
Yeah.
Goosebumps, anything can happen. You may have
get
someone
their
who wants to
hands
cut
torn
off
off.
your hands to
Yeah, you're
make
right.
a piano playing
Shrink your
robot.
head.
Gross Factor for Halfway horrible?
High.
High.
And right off
Super
the bat.
high.
Frame 1.
Goopy corpses, blue goo, zombies getting impaled and decapitated Kurgan style. Yeah, good episode. Gross factor alone. Gross factor for Goosebumps.
I don't think very gross.
What the factor for Tales from the Crypt? I'm going to say high because of that weird double evil double plot. And in the end, I don't know if he's just preserving his life or if he's trying to turn himself into a zombie so he'll live forever. His stated reason is he has to preserve it.
Well, I don't know what you got, Clancy Brown, but you got it.
What the factor? High. What the factor for Goosebumps?
I say also high. I mean, I jumped out of my seat the first time I found it and tried to switch you on to this episode.
The stuff with like the jungle magic and what is it and does he have it or not?
It was what the factor in that delicious kids show, Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark Way?
Yeah. Vink factor for Tales from the Crypt, low.
I mean, he had a singular scientific focus and was kind of a ghoul. He wasn't manic, though, in any way.
He was, because he was having
actually.
Homicidal blackouts.
Yeah.
And he was a businessman who also was doing voodoo rituals.
Science magic.
Vink factor for Goosebumps.
The aunt was a little bit of a Vink in that she was doing jungle science and...
The Hollingworths were Lovecraftian.
Yeah.
Sorcerers.
Yeah. Miskatonics.
No one was so over the top, though.
Except for their outrageous British accents.
It tickles the Vink meter, but it doesn't surpass Roger Lassen.
Yeah.
Theme of Rumble in the Jungle.
I think it was high for both.
I'd call that a match. I've crunched the numbers. I think Tales from the Crypt takes it. Some weird, not so goofy ethical concerns arise from these episodes. Roger Lassen is bringing this preservative, Extheon B, to market, and he claims that it will preserve things forever to the extent that it will effectively end famine. That would be like a game changer for the history of Earth and humanity going forward.
Yeah, but it would also be hugely threatening to food manufacturers and their bottom lines. They would never allow it because altruism does not rule in this world. Like, you know the story of the light bulb in the firehouse that's been burning consistently for like 150 years?
Yes.
Because when they originally made light bulbs, they just made them to last. And then they were like, whoa, if we do that, nobody will ever buy another light bulb. So then they made them crappier so they would burn out. That's how our world works.
That is how our world works. However, if food is always available, people would be eating a lot of it, right? You'd have billions of people eating food.
Yeah, I suppose that food at least is a consumable, so no matter what, you do still need to constantly produce it.
You would be making more of it.
Maybe this is how The Walking Dead happened and those characters can all continue to drive cars even years after the apocalypse because they got the Klaxon B into their gasoline, which preserved it forever, rather than it going bad after 3 months like it really would in the real world. And that's how the zombies happened also.
Yeah, more importantly. That's how I got into the zombies. But it just, one of these unintended consequences, or it's something that, you know, when you're chasing a sci-fi or horror plot, and you're like, people, how do they get around? I don't know. Let's just say they have teleporters. And you're like, whoa. Full stop. This is now a story about teleportation and how that literally changes everything we know in relation to space and time. And just throwing in like, oh, by the way, if we cure world hunger. If that literally happened, I think Roger Lassen would get the Nobel Prize. No matter how many friends he sacrificed. You know, the question is, do the ends justify the means? Can you do something evil like sacrificing your best friend if it literally saves billions?
I don't know, man.
Billions
I don't
of
think
lives.
my morals would allow me to, no matter what. Or test it on the fucking apples before sacrificing your best friend.
Oh, well, I mean, at this point, they already had proof. I'm not saying Roger Lassen was good, but there's a lot of science that is done that is not purely ethical. But if good things come from it, does that taint it?
I'll have to watch every show ever again to find the answer.
That's how we get our ethics from Tales from the Crypt.
And I'm afraid I'm gonna have to rerun for my life.
So, folks, we've got a programming note for you. We are going to be rebranding the show around Halloween and horror-themed entertainment. We're going to call it We Bleed Orange and Black, and starting in October, we're going to kick off the new show with episode 1, and we're going to be bringing you all the things you love from the Six Demon Bag and Put Up Your Spooks. We're going to keep reviewing horror TV. We're going to be bringing you original short horror fiction, and we're going to be doing some interviews with creators of your favorite spooky content.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So for now, Ryan and I would like to say, put up your spooks and rerun for your life.
Crypt Keeper.